So the sun is a huge flaming ball of gas billions of miles away, and we sort of owe it everything for life on Earth. But sometimes shooting outside in bright, harsh sunlight can be tricky. You've got to deal with not getting flat images, you've got to try and shape it and find contrast, and then even when you do that, you've got to deal with tricky exposure situations where you're balancing out very intense hard light, transitioning quickly into deep shadow. So today we're going to look at some very simple and affordable techniques that you can use to tame that great big fireball in the sky and deliver beautiful soft lighting when you're working outside. And even if you don't quite nail it, we're going to look at a cheeky little trick you can use in post to help tidy up any differences in exposure that you might find between like your model and the background. So a few weeks ago we were graced with the rare appearance of some sun in the UK, and I currently have in some new full frame lenses from Sirui, which are very interesting. Stay tuned for a review on those, but I needed to capture some test footage for those, so we decided to bounce down to the coast. So it was me, Steph was modelling, and my friend Pierluigi. We were shooting on the Pyxis, and we were able to capture some really beautiful images using some really simple diffusion techniques. All we were using on the day was a simple 5-in-1 reflector and a small Matthews artificial silk scrim. It's obviously winter at the moment, the sun is a bit lower in the sky than it would be in summer, so that's already helping us. So most of the time when you're working with light, especially if you're outside, is to try and find contrast, is to sculpt with light. So the balance between light and dark, contrast, is how you are going to sort of define your images. When you've got a bright, hard light source like the sun, you can play around with that and have really high contrast ratios. At the beginning of the day we did play around with some of that hard contrast, but we much preferred experimenting with reducing the contrast across the face, just softening up that roll off, that transition from the light side of the face into the shadow. We're just using simple principles here. We're filming, shadow side of the face to the camera. Again, that's giving us this contrast. And then we're just playing around with the two diffusion tools to achieve, like a soft, diffuse wrap. The scrim was mostly used on the close-up shots. As you can see here, it's very easy to maneuver. It's a small panel, so it's quite easy just to hover over above. And then for the wider shots, you need much more coverage, so you need a much larger diffuser. So that's when we use the large 5-in-1 reflector. In terms of the quality of diffusion between the two, I find the Matthews artificial silk scrim is much nicer. I think it cuts a little bit more light, probably about 1.5 stops, whereas the 5-in-1 reflector is around a stop. And then the artificial silk I also find warms up the light a little bit, maybe like a couple of hundred Kelvin, enough to notice. You've probably heard the term before, the sort of sun sandwich, where you're placing your talent or your thing of interest in between the camera and the sun behind them. And then it's basically just how you rotate round on that line about how that light is interacting and hitting your model. If you're in quite like a flat open area, especially if it's midday, then the sun is going to be blasting your whole environment. So if you're cutting the amount of light that's hitting your talent, the level on their face is going to be dropping, but you're still going to have like bright, potentially overexposed ambient light in the location behind you. So time of day is really important in terms of that control over light levels. Towards the end of the day, beginning of the day, the intensity of the sky is going to be lower, and the intensity of light, of ambient light in your environment is also going to be lower. And if the sun is also lower in the sky, then it's going to be casting more shadows, and then that's also going to add patches of light and more interest into your environment as well, into the backdrop. If you've got this hard light hitting everything else in your environment and you've just got this soft diffuse light on your model, it doesn't always look super motivated or natural. So you've got to play around and be wary of that and think about what's in the back of your shot and whether the brightness of that is going to overpower what you're seeing. What do you think?
Yeah, nice stuff. Look.
So what happens if you get your images back and you didn't quite nail the exposure difference between the background and your subject? So what happens if the background's too bright, it's overpowering and distracting and taking attention away from your subject? Well, there is a little trick that you can try when using Resolve, and that's using Magic Mask. Okay, so we're in Resolve. This is the original image. So say your client or someone says, hey, Ed, this background, it's looking a bit too bright, it's drawing the eye away from our beautiful model. Can we do anything just to bring the background down, but keep the exposure and the levels on the model exactly the same? Yes, you can. And you're going to do it using Magic Mask. So this is the shot we've corrected. You can see here, everything on Steph's face is staying the same, but the background has dropped. So it's all happening in these first two nodes here. This is our node structure. Just to quickly run through, we've got an general global exposure node. I've just done a quick tweak to bring the intensity of the blue sky down because we're using a VND which had a polarizer, and it's just made the sky a bit too intense for me. Another node that just very subtly increases the color density of the greens. We've got a general color density node that's just sort of bringing down lumens and increasing the saturation of colors. I've put a softening node in there that just sort of softens out these lenses are very sharp, so I've just softened, added some softening techniques in there to blur out the image a bit. Then we've got grain, we've got a bit of glow, our Rec 709 transform, and then I've just desaturated the image a little bit on the final node. So quite a simple node structure. Most of the heavy lifting is happening in the effects that I'm just dialing in. So with this particular adjustment now, it gives us full control over different layers of the image. So the Magic Mask here has tracked Steph. You can see here the red outline. It has really easily and quickly tracked all of her throughout the image. And then allowed us to make selections and basically just isolate the backdrop and do an exposure correction in the next node. So let's just do that now. So in the Magic Mask node, you just go to Magic Mask, and all you do is just go down to here, plus draw a little line around your thing of interest. You can see that. And then, in theory, if you click here, that shows the mask, bang, it's done at first go, which is amazing. So basically the red is the sort of object that you have selected. And if it doesn't quite get it right, maybe you've got a slightly lower contrast image, there are ways to clean up and refine the selection. If it has selected anything outside that you don't want, you can click here to the minus and then just draw a line over any of the red areas in the image that it's selected by mistake. So now we've got the, Steph selected, the model selected. The next thing is to track. So we just want to make sure that it keeps the selection throughout the moving image, throughout the timeline for the duration of the clip. So we just click this here. It's a really nice clean selection there. Great, really happy with that. So we can just scroll through and we can see that she is really perfectly selected. So you might also, if you're finding that the edges of the selection are too harsh, you can go to denoise and that will just soften the transition a little bit. With the denoise, be careful, play around with it. I find that when you're making exposure differences between the subject and the background, if you put the denoise on, it basically smudges the transition between the two selections and will kind of give a bit of a halo glow effect because one's brighter than the other and the transition of the exposure changes sort of mushed together. So I would avoid it in this situation. So what we need to do now is we need to pass that mask information onto the next node. So I think it's just cleaner to make any changes on a separate node. So you take the blue box, blue arrow, goes in there, and now this node is basically pulling the mask information. So we want to keep Steph the same. We don't really want to make any changes to Steph. So what we're going to go to now is go to this. Going to go to the key node. We're just going to invert that mask. So if we go back to Magic Mask, now see we've just selected the background because that's all we want to change. So I'm going to turn that off so you can see what we're doing. Then we're going to go to an exposure tab. And this is where you can just dial in your exposure. You know, if you go too much, you completely isolate Steph there. Don't really want to do that, or maybe you do, I don't know, it's up to you. But then you can just use, you know, your lift gamma gain to basically dial in any exposure changes. Maybe you want to desaturate the background as well a little bit just to make her colors pop. You know, and again, subtle is better. And I'm just going to do it quickly, maybe reduce the contrast as well. And then in your next node, where you're doing global exposure changes, you can maybe, you know, just finesse the overall image to make sure it's looking natural and not too distracting. So maybe bring the shadows up a little bit more. I mean, this is just rough. You know, I just want to quickly show you how you might do this. So there you go. And you can see really quickly we've been able to finesse the background, just bring it down a bit and allow Steph to pop. You know, if you also found that you wanted to affect Steph, you need to make some changes just to her relative to the background, you can just add another node, link it up, and make those changes. So the Magic Mouse is just a really powerful tool. It's really quick and easy to use, especially in this situation when you've got a very high contrast differential between your subject and the background. Especially if you've got a brighter background, it's really quick and easy to do. You don't need to do anything specialist, and you can make that tweak instantly and change it very quickly. So if your client comes back and says, no, bring it down even more, you know, you can do it. And you can see over the course of the file that it has tracked and maintained those changes. So it's really powerful. So let's look at another really quick example, another image here. Again, quite a lot of brightness in that backdrop. Let's go into the Magic Mask tab. Okay, it's done a pretty good job of tracking again. So there you can see, again, pretty substantial difference. You can play around with reducing the saturation or even increasing it if you want. But it just allows you to sort of surgically go in and adjust problem areas that you just couldn't quite fix on the day. So yeah, it's great. It's a really powerful tool. Everything we've covered in this video is, you know, combining fairly basic principles, shooting shadow side of the face, diffusing harsh sunlight, and then obviously if you can't quite get it right in camera, relying on the mantra of fix it in post. Both of the diffusers are relatively cheap. You can get a huge 5-in-1 reflector for between £50 and £70 or dollars. And then the purpose-built Matthews Scrim is maybe a little bit more expensive, probably around 100 quid for one of that size. The Scrim is a slightly nicer quality of diffusion. It maintains a bit more warmth and softness than the 5-in-1 reflector, but at the end of the day, you know, they're minor subtle differences that you probably aren't gonna notice. You know, what I recommend is, you know, even if you are on a budget, just picking up one of the cheapest, smaller 5-in-1 reflectors. They pop up, they're easy, you can put them in a backpack, and just going to the park on a sunny day and practicing diffusing sunlight and moving, you know, your talent around relative to the camera. You don't need an expensive camera, you can just shoot it on an iPhone as well. It's exactly what we're doing now. Again, I'm filming this talking head and I'm diffusing the sun with the Scrim in the bedroom. So you can use it in all sorts of situations, including filming YouTube. So that's it. Thanks for watching. If you like the look of the footage in this, we shot it on the Pyxis with these brand new Sue full frame lenses. I think they're getting announced today or around in the next day or two, depending when this video goes out. So if you like the look of them, we'll have a full review video coming up on the channel, hopefully in the next week. I've been testing them out. They are fantastic if you like sharp, clean, and controlled lenses that are going to be available at an absolutely incredible price. I just found out what the price of these lenses is going to be and I was surprised. So do stay tuned for the full review video, which will be dropping soon. So if you're not subscribed, please consider doing so. Drop me a comment down below, it helps with the algorithm, give me a thumbs up, all that sort of stuff. And yeah, I'm Ed and I'll see you next time. See ya.